Alright everybody, so how are we doing today? Time to cover a little news in the world of journalism. So let us begin, shall we? From Ruptly, a trusted source, I've verified it many times. Problem of NYT's 1619 project isn't that it sees America through slavery, it's that it tells untruths. Well, why can't they both be a problem? Anyway, conservatives called the New York Times project divisive. Progressives hailed it as the real history of America. All before publication, we gave it a read and found the U.S. new myths about itself as flawed as the old. For all the right-wing outrage engulfing Twitter now, the conclusions reached by the 1619 project would have been guessed from the start. After all, an initiative that aims to reframe the country's history understanding 1619, the year the first African slaves arrived in Virginia, as our true founding and placing the consequences of slavery and the contributions of black Americans at the very center of the story, we tell ourselves about who we are, is hardly pursuing a hidden agenda. Oh no, it's pretty obvious. This is not journalism. This is activism. This is just yet another attempt by progressives to push the narrative of white guilt. Fun fact narratives, not a single... Fun fact progressives, not a single white person alive today was there. Therefore, we cannot be held responsible in any fashion. You can hold our grandfathers and great-grandfathers responsible, but not us. See how that works? It's a little thing called personal responsibility. The political stance of the New York Times is no mystery. Either while the recent leaked staff town hall meeting showed that with the failure of the Mueller investigation to displace Donald Trump, race will be its main line of attack on the incumbent in the election year. The constantly updated online project, a dedicated page and an ethos whose contents will permeate the entire newspaper, is presumably the flagship of this effort. Nor is there anything subtle about its constituent articles, which all follow the same formula. Blaming slavery, a white historical figure, or white people as a class for present-day shortcomings of American society, which in turn affect black people disproportionately according to what has already been placed online. Dead white slavers and their inheritors are at fault for lack of functioning democracy. Rapacious capitalism, incarceration rates, political gridlock, poor health care, traffic jams, and the country's sugar addiction. The country's sugar addiction. Do you understand how supply and demand works? The reason why sugar was given was because it was demanded in the first place. You cannot blame sugar addiction on capitalism. You have to blame sugar addiction on ignorance and lack of self-control. I mean, be reasonable here. And as to the idea that you can just blame this on dead slavers and their inheritors, even from the view of a fatalist or a determinist who believes in fate and destiny and all that stuff, you can't blame their inheritors. Because again, they weren't there. So modern day white people didn't do any of that stuff. And really, I don't care about what happened to some black people in 1619. I don't care. You know what I care about? Is what's happening to black people in 2019. Let's talk about that. Oh, but no. The progressives, or should I say the regressive left, are always looking at the past. Funny how that is. It's almost like they don't want to admit that progress has been made. Isn't that funny? It's almost like having victim status creates perks. That you get stuff for being a victim. Now it's all falling into place now, isn't it? But for all that, the articles which can be accessed for free here cannot be waved away in mass. Many are well-researched, fluently written, and provide plenty of genuine insights, and a host of highly dubious assertions. Black people have done more for American democracy than white people. Citation needed. The truth is that as much democracy as this nation has today, it has been born on the backs of black resistance. Our founding fathers may not have actually believed in the ideals they espoused, but black people did. We were told once by virtue of our bondage that we could never be American, but it was by virtue of our bondage that we became the most American of all. Platitude. Thesis. The founding fathers note the lack of capitalization in the original, were slave-owning hypocrites, while blacks had the civil rights movement to true equality. Then all African Americans were the true perfecters of democracy. Just the sheer gall it takes to strip the historic figures that fought for the country's independence, wrote an example-setting constitution, and implemented the most egalitarian major government of their time, of all credit in a couple of paragraphs to accuse them of being frauds. Yeah, that actually is extremely ballsy. Can you imagine? The witful historical ignorance that negates all differences between the 1780s and the 1960s. The cultural chauvinism that it takes to take a shared national achievement, the work of millions of individuals over centuries, and breezily assign it to one group. But then statues must be toppled. Again, they say, slavery caused the 2008 crash and the capitalist exploitation of workers. Oh God, they're socialists. Go figure. U.S. capitalism is the culture of acquiring wealth without work, growing at all costs and abusing the powerless. It is the culture that brought us the panic of 1837, the stock market crash of 1929, and the recession of 2008. It is the culture that has produced staggering inequality and undignified working conditions. If today America promotes a particular kind of low-road capitalism, a union-busting capitalism of poverty wages, gig jobs, and normalized insecurity, a winner-take-all capitalism of stunning disparities not only permitting but awarding financial rule-bending, a racist capitalism that ignores the fact that slavery didn't just deny black freedom, but built white fortunes, originating the black-white wealth gap that annually grows wider. One reason is that American capitalism was founded on the lowest road there is. This is Matthew Desmond, sociologist at the University of Princeton. You can make all the eye-popping Gladwell-esque connections you want between antebellum cotton farmers, squeamish British abolitionist investors who wanted to profit from slavery without getting their hands dirty, and reckless Mississippi bank lenders from 1833, but they did not invent modern capitalism or its financial systems. That's a tendentious simplification of a global process that started long before the Mayflower set sail from Plymouth. Yes, and just to clarify a few things, don't you just love how socialists are always straw-manning capitalism as being something other than what it is? You know what the definition of capitalism is? Create competition within the marketplace. It has nothing to do with exploitation in of itself. It can sometimes be anatomical of capitalism, but is not the definition. And by the way, everything that this person cites, this Matthew Desmond, as being a result of capitalist culture, literally everything he cited was actually the result of legislation from the government interfering in the free market. Literally everything. Because recessions, such as the one in 2008, are a result of government protectionism protecting bad investments, which end up not paying off, resulting in the value of properties increasing and the ability to purchase them to decrease. That's also the ultimate cause of the Great Depression in the United States. The Great Depression itself would have been a small stock market crash, which would have resulted in a recession in the United States and would have recovered eventually. But FDR elongated it. Stock market crashes are a natural part of stock markets, and any stockbroker would tell you that stocks rise and fall all the time. And when stocks do fall, surprise, surprise, they may not be worth much, but they're very cheap. The rich and wealthy can buy the stocks, and then when the stocks finally achieve value again, they're like, ha ha, we bought this when it was worth nothing. And the incentive to do so, of course, would be, oh, hey, look, cheap stocks. We can invest in this company and make a bunch of money later on. The potential. These socialists never understand economic theory, let alone they don't understand universal economic theory. Hell, they probably don't even understand socialist economic theory. They're too busy outraging and drinking their Starbucks coffee. And yes, Britain actually did do a lot more to end slavery. That is a fact. Anyway, to finish off this article in a bit of a long stretch, Besides, is capitalism really the worst thing that could have happened to America? The world's second biggest economy, the home of Google and Apple, of Nike and Amazon. What would Desmond have preferred as America's historical economic path? Russian serfdom? Chinese communism? African feudalism? How many of even the poorest black Americans would even now choose to go back to their ancestral homeland of the Congo or Liberia, where average GDP per capita is 50 times lower? No one says U.S. capitalism is perfect, but that myopic self-obsession seems ironically an extension of the American exceptionalism the writers here rail at. Look at us, even our suffering is without comparison. Yes, because even the poor in this country, even the poorest can buy things the poorest in other countries couldn't even dream of having. Funny that. Sounds like someone's got a case of first world problems, huh? Anyway, further quote of this Project 1619 project: biased white doctors mistreat black patients because of old racial theories. The centuries-old belief in racial differences in physiology has continued to mask the brutal effects of discrimination and structural inequities, instead basing blame on individuals and their communities for statistically poor health outcomes, rather than conceptualizing race as a risk factor that predicts disease or disability because of a fixed susceptibility conceived on shaky ground centuries ago. We would do better to understand race as a proxy for bias, disadvantage, and ill treatment. This is from Linda Villarosa, freelance journalist. This is where we move from suspect sociology to straight anti-science. Yeah, 19th century assumptions that blacks have a smaller lung capacity might have been rooted in prejudice, but it doesn't follow from this that races do not exist, and that all people, regardless of their genetic origin, must receive identical medical treatment, and the doctors who are not giving it are racists. To advocate denigrates the valid research that shows that most African Americans carry different genes, including ones that make them susceptible to high blood pressure. This is one step away from the conspiratorial AIDS is a white man's disease trope and the kind of thinking that is more likely to kill than to save black Americans. Yeah, they sometimes even use racial differences of physiology in forensics. Bone shape. Of course, when you bring that up in a forensics class at a college these days, they might call you a racist Nazi. A curriculum fit for children? This is just a sample throughout the series. There are plenty more of these far-reaching claims, and not at margins. But at the heart of the arguments being made, there is nothing wrong with narrowly conceptualized revisionist history to drive an argument in a partisan newspaper. But the partnership with the Smithsonian and the Pulitzer Center, which has turned these articles into a curriculum for school children, suggests that the New York Times is seeking not just legitimacy, but desires to generally rewrite the prevailing narrative of American history. It should not be allowed to do so. Still think the NYT is a journalist newspaper? No. This is not journalism, this is activism. This is activism. Know the freaking difference. Journalism is going out and researching an event to find the facts and then reporting those facts. Activism is changing policy in order to effect greater change over time. Not even remotely the same thing. This is pseudo-history at best. They're reframing it in order to get what they want. And let's not forget the great quote of Napoleon Bonaparte. History is a lie agreed upon. They can change the lie. The only true history is what we can establish through forensics, or otherwise established by comparing one account to another account and finding the median of what information is common. All history is revisionist history. But the truths can be found through heavy research and bipartisan comparison. If we compare this history to the current official history, what do we establish? Yes, whites brought black slaves from Africa in 1619. But did black slaves build our democracy through seeking equal treatment? No. No, they did not. Black slaves did not create the Constitution. They did not create the Declaration of Independence. The foundation was created in an act of rebellion against the British, who ironically actually did more to free slaves than we did. How very ironic indeed. So yeah. Screw the New York Times. It is absolute hellspawn. Peace!